In this session, we want to talk about macros. And macros are essentially the black magic behind Excel. It's what makes it work. So we want to tap into some of those functions and the code that actually goes on behind this. So how do we do this? First, I want to show you there's a developer tab at the very top of your Excel workbook. If you don't have this, it's really simple to add to the ribbon. Just simply right-click anywhere on your ribbon, go to the Customize the Ribbon command, and then you may or may not have developer marked, but if you don't, go ahead and mark that, press OK, and that way you can add the developer tab into your Excel spreadsheet. So with that comes all of the different tools you're going to need just to run a simple macro. And the way I'm going to show you today is not to code it from scratch, but rather to record it. It's the easy way. So in this example, I want to show you how we take the data, transform it using that macro. So this exercise, the goal of it is to transform information on this spreadsheet and reformat it in a certain way that I've got to upload to another system. So on this sheet, I have shipment information, I have an ID, a date, origin, location info, destination location info, weight, a weekday, and additional information. And I just need to transform some of that to have origin-specific, destination-specific information, a date, and then a must-arrive by date, which will be, we'll just say 10 days from the ship-by date. All right, so first step is once we have our developer sub-tab up, I'm just going to go ahead and click Record Macro. And if you remember, well, before we jump into that, we need a macro name, so I'm just going to name this one Transformation Macro. Let's click OK. Now note, it doesn't let me do that. The reason is it doesn't allow spaces. Let's just either do one word or one word altogether. Press OK. Now, you can see at any point I can stop the recording, and that'll stop the macro recording process. All right. So the first thing you notice is we need the origin, city, state, and zip location. Let's go ahead and get those items. So I'm going to start here, row 2, and I'm going to press the Control-Shift-Down key that copies all the way down in the workbook for what I need. I'm going to press Control-C, which will copy. Let's go over here and paste as values. I'm going to do the same thing for destination, city, state, and zip. Let's go back up top to our workbook, and let's copy those fields as well. Finally, we need a date, and then we're going to calculate off of the date we put in there. So here's our goods issued date. Copy that over. Okay, so you see it's got the numerical format for that date. Let's go ahead and change that just to make it simple. Okay, so we have our must arrive by date. In this example, I'm just going to add 10 days to the date column we just copied over, and I'm going to hit this little button in the bottom right-hand corner, copies it all the way down for all of my entries. So now we have all the information that we need, and then let's just stop recording. So in essence, we just created our first macro through the recording process. Now, what I want to show you is how to add a button and assign that macro to the button. So where this would come into handy is if you're running a report or doing the same type of activity in that spreadsheet day in and day out, you can use a macro to really automate that process and save quite a bit of time. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. I like using just a simple button up here. So we're going to go to this Insert tab under the Controls area. Click on that button, and let's just drag our button here. Now, our macro name, let's go ahead and click our Transformation Macro. Press OK. So we've assigned that transformation macro to this button. And this button, it floats in the spreadsheet. So we can also right-click it, and we see Format Control, Assign Macro. So if we click on Assign Macro, we can click again on that macro name. That's the one that's assigned to it. And we can also click up here to rename it. So we'll say button to transform. We can name it whatever. Now, let's do this. I'm going to erase this information, and let's test it out. So we want Excel to do this all on its own. I'm going to press this button. Here we go. it just did the same task we did in less than a second when it took us roughly 20 to 30 seconds. And that's not a huge time savings, but over the course of a lot of different processes, you can see where that could add up. Now, I want to show you the back end of this. It's called Visual Basic. So if we go up here to our Developer tab, let's just click Macros. So all the different macros that I record or write are going to be here. At any point, I can click on one and go to Edit. So up pops the Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA code. And without going too far in the code, this is exactly all the steps that we just recorded. Now, I won't go into specifics here, but I encourage you to play around with trial and error, taking some of these steps out and leaving some in. You'll see that there's certain steps, for example, where we ended. So range A1 on the last sheet that we selected, that we may not necessarily need. So you could fix some of these things on the fly. But again, a lot of this will make sense the more you practice and get into it. But just know that there's code here behind the scenes that you can play with to an extent, because you can always re-record the macro and you can debug here. At any point, you can exit out of this and just know that that's going on behind the scenes. Anytime you press that button, Excel's going through that code line by line, starting at the top and executing it to run what you've recorded there. So definitely encourage you to do a little trial and error, play around with inserting and deleting things as you can to make the code do exactly what you want it to. And that's really it on macros. There's a lot of other different twists. Here you can certainly have different little form controls, boxes, counters, scroll bars, some fun stuff. You can make the macros as complex as you want. One of my favorite is kind of a cascading macro where you refresh pivot tables one after the other. That helps when you're doing large data transformations. So anyways, a lot here, but macros, it feels like black magic, but it's not. It's just the code going on behind the scenes.